So once we've got our converted VHD in a storage account, we can begin to configure our virtual network and everything to run PFSense. So to get started, we can start with creating a virtual network. And we're going to do this manually like this so that we can tweak the settings instead of just creating the virtual network along with and as we create the VM. So first thing we want to do is name our virtual network, and I'm setting it to the Melbourne area in Australia. Now it's a good idea to tweak the network IP address pool or the address space that we're going to use so that it doesn't collide with commodity modems and any networks that you might have at home or work or school or wherever you have. Now, what we also want to do this time is add an IPv6 address space, and if we do that and then we go in and edit our subnet, and we're going to call this the WAN subnet, we then get a checkbox here to create an IPv6 dual assigned subnet. So we just click save on that, and we can also at this particular time add another subnet called the LAN subnet, and it will have a dual assignment as well. So once we have that configured, we can just click create and wait for it to assign. Now our next phase will be taking our disk VHD that we've imported and converting it into a managed disk. So we again select a resource group, this time just give our disk a simple name, choose storage blob, and browse to our storage account and select our VHD. Now we want to make sure that our OS type is set to Linux, otherwise if it's not, it will be unbootable. We know as we configured our Hyper-V VM that it was generation 2, so we select that, and then we choose the size that we configured in Hyper-V, which was 16 gigabytes. It's a good idea to always make your disks as small as possible to save on cost in Azure. And once we've done that, we just leave all the defaults, and after validation passes we click create. Now our next step is to take that disk that we've just created. So we can do that by going to the disks area here and just clicking on the disk, and we know that we've done it correctly because it says create VM. So a disk that's not set up to boot with the correct operating system will hide this. You won't see this create VM. So let's click create VM for this disk, and then we're just going to give the virtual machine a name. Standard B1S with 1 gig of memory is okay. You might go down or up if you're not going to do much with the VM, so you could go to 0.5 gig, but I think recommended is 1 gig or greater, so that's a good size. I'm going to just turn off public inbound ports because I'm going to open up the network security group to make the firewall do all the firewalling, not have two areas to configure rules in. So after we do that, we need to definitely go across to networking to make sure that the WAN interface is correctly applied. So that virtual machine that we created only had one interface, which is the WAN interface, and we're just going to apply that interface to this subnet. We definitely want a public IP address, and we're just saying the defaults for other stuff. So I think we can now just review and create and then deploy this virtual machine when it validates. Now while we're waiting for that to happen, we might go to our virtual machines tab, and okay, did I actually end up? That was good, wasn't it? I mustn't have clicked the no, it must be, no, it's deploying. It was just being funny. All right, let's go to the virtual machines tab and create a virtual machine in the LAN. We're going to go TGM test VM, and can use Ubuntu, same VM, SSH public key. We might use our SSH key, so we'll just go into the SSH folder and grab our public key. And change the user, use an existing public key, and I'm going to turn that one off as well. And review and create. Now before no, I probably missed a step there at some point, but let's now move on to getting our machine properly running. Now it's started itself up. We're going to stop and go yes to deallocate that for a minute, and then we're going to go to network interfaces, and we're going to create a resource group again. In a resource group, we're going to create a TGM PFS LAN NIC. That will do. And we need to select its proper subnet. We want IPv4 and version 6, and we want a dynamic IP address for the moment. So once that deployment's finished, we can go into our virtual machine and go down to networking and networking settings, and we want to attach the LAN interface as well. And we just have to wait for a few seconds for that to complete attaching, and then we're right to start. It looks like it's a little bit, yeah, the interface sometimes is a bit non-current, so you might have to click refresh to get your buttons back. So click on start, and you can then go from start and then go down to help and the serial console, and then just wait for the console to connect, and you can watch the boot up process in Azure. Now, if the WAN interface takes a long time to load, that's an indication you've got a problem with DHCP or networking. But in this case, it seems to have come up quite quickly. So if you're waiting for 10 minutes, you know you've got some sort of network issue. Now all we need to do now is just wait for the boot up sequence to complete. So while we wait for that, just for a few moments, let's go back to our overview tab and find our public IP address. And what we do is we remember our high port that we configured on our PFSense instance in Hyper-V, and then we attempt to connect. Now, right at this moment, this is not going to work, so we just got to go back and do one more step with our security groups. So go back to our primary or our WAN interface and just create a port rule. And it's going to be very open. It's any port on any protocol. Just allow it and just choose that. Now this will take, sometimes it takes 10-30 seconds for this rule to apply and to open traffic. So you might find that you'll be watching the spinner for a little while, and then suddenly it will give you a security warning to say it's connected and the certificate's untrusted. So that might take a few moments. Okay. Yep. So there we go, and we just have connected. Now we need to continue. Now I'm just going to show an error that will cause you to have an issue. This is a problem that it basically protects you from DNS rebinding attacks, I think. But how do we get around this? We seem to be locked out. So here's one way of getting around it, and it involves SSHing as admin to the firewall. And I'm just trying to SSH there, and I've just realized that I've forgotten to do something. So let's go and fix that problem. I've forgotten to configure the virtual machine that we created to run the SSH server. So SSH is not available at the moment. So I just need to go in and start the SSH server. So you can see here number 14 is the option to start the SSH server. And then once we've done that, we can also we want to do some port forwarding. We want to say, okay, grab that local port 20,073 and then forward it to the firewall and connect it to the same port on the firewall. So now what we can do is we can connect not to the WAN address but to our computer's local host address. So, and it will forward the traffic to the firewall and work around the restriction that's in place on this IP address. So we can then accept the legal notice and go into advanced, scroll down until we see alternate host names, paste our IP address in and say yes to that. And then once we do that, we can go admin and put our password in, and we're now successfully connected. Now another thing that we noticed as we first log in is that we're using the old default host name. Let's give ourselves a proper internet domain name here. So we go into public IP address, go find our public IP addresses, and we've got this one here, and we want to go into settings and configuration, and we're just going to call this one TGN PFS, the same name. You may not want to do that. You could name this whatever you want. It's fairly arbitrary. And go back to overview, refresh the interface, and just copy the domain name, and then we can go into general setup, paste in our host name and paste in our domain and just save. So now our system can be accessed via both the IP address and a host name. Now you could obviously add a host name pointing to the IP address in your DNS service to make it nice and short. So we've now connected to our PFSense firewall. Now let's have a look at currently the status of our interfaces, and what we can see on our WAN interface is we've got IP version 4 running, but we only have an IP version 6 link local address, and we want to have both. We want dual assignment. So we go into our interfaces, go to WAN, and we can see that it's got DHCP6 running, but it's not picking up a DHCP address, IPv6 address. So what we want to do is we'll go back into, let's go back to our virtual machine, go into our network settings, select, so obviously we've got our LAN and then this is our WAN interface, so we select our WAN interface, then we want to add a configuration. So we've got an IP version 4 configuration, but we need an IPv6 config, and we want to say it's IPv6, we just want an IP address, we want it to stay static, and we also want to assign a new IP version 6 public IP address to the WAN interface. So that will take a few moments to deploy, and as we wait for that to happen, we just go back and do the assignment of our LAN address. So we've got an available interface here, and we just need to click on add and then save that change, and then go into the LAN settings, enable interface, and just say, look, I want both IP4 and IPv6, and then we click save and apply. Now what will happen when we go back into the interfaces is we should have, let's have a look what's we've got. We should have definitely an IPv6 address here, but we don't have one still on our gateway. So let's double check that that's completed. Okay, so it says we cannot pass the request. Now let's go in and refresh and see if, yeah, so basically what that's saying is we can't do it while it's attached to, we can't add that address while it's attached to our firewall. So what we're going to do is we're just going to choose to shut down our firewall, and it looks like we've actually done something and locked ourselves out. So what's happened there is I've added the LAN interface here, and it's locked us out of the firewall. So we've got an issue there. So can we could, right at this moment, we've still got a connection over localhost to the firewall, but what's happened, if we have a look here, the anti-lockout rule has moved to the LAN side, and so we're now locked out from the new connections to the firewall, directly to the firewall. So it works on this one because it's localhost, and we could add a new connection, but let's see a way of fixing this so that we can work around if we locked ourselves out from the command line. Well, let's do that. So we go back to our virtual machine and go down to Serial Console, and we connect to our Serial Console, get a shell, and what we can do, we need a little bit of information. So we want to go ifconfig me / and I'm going to make a note of my external IP address here at home, and I'm going to say easyrule pass. The interface is the WAN interface, so I want to add a rule for TCP for, let's see, can I need to paste, for this source IP address. Let's just say any to make it easy, and then I just want to add this rule. So this has basically added a rule to mean that we can now get back in because we accidentally locked ourselves out. So we've got this easy rule, but so that we don't do that again, let's make a few changes to our rule set for the WAN interface, so to give ourselves nice explicit admin access from known hosts. So what we want to do is want to create an alias and add an IP alias, and we just call this admin hosts, and we want to paste in our, we could give it a descriptive name and just save that. Then we want to go into ports aliases and go add, and we call this admin ports, and we want to add the ports that we will do our administration from. So we'll call that web config and then save that as well. So I've got those ports and IP aliases. Now let's go in and create a rule on the WAN interface to pass anything from admin hosts to the WAN address that is heading to the admin ports. We want to log it and we want to say allow admin and then save that and apply. Now at that point we don't need this easy pass rule, but it's gotten us out of trouble so that we can actually administer our firewall when we've made a bit of a boo-boo. Now you might want to leave this anti-lockout rule here, or you can turn it off. But another thing the firewall's doing, it's responding to port 80. So if I go here, let's just demonstrate that. So at the moment, the firewall, if we connect on port 80, it's doing actually I'll be a liar there, because let's show that again. Go to ports, we want to add this one. Let's add that port so that we can actually access it, because I've locked it out. But right at this moment, right, let's try that one more time. Yeah, so right at this moment, if we connect on port 80 when it's allowed, it will automatically redirect to that high port. Now that's something we might not want to happen, so let's go into advanced and find the disable the Web Configurator redirect rule, so it'll no longer reply on port 80. And I might just search for it, anti, and then disable the anti-lockout rule. If that was on the, if that rule was on the WAN side, you could disable that rule as well, the anti-lockout rule, but we don't want to do that. We always want that to be in there if it's on the LAN side. Yeah, so that stays there. And notice now it's removed the port 80 because there's no redirect to that high port. Alright, so we've now got a lot of our firewall running. Let's just double check the interfaces. And we definitely need to reboot to pick up, or halt, we should say. Let's halt the system, and we can see that it's going down. Halt the system and then go back into our Azure portal, and it will tell us in a moment that it's shut down. And once it's shut down, you can do this less cleanly and just hit the stop button, but you can shut it down and then stop it, and then we want to deallocate the firewall. Now what that means is that we'll be able to modify the network interfaces because they're not currently connected to the firewall. So you can see it's gone to deallocating status, and shortly, if everything works out well, it will go to deallocated stopped, and there it is. Alright, so now we want to go into our network settings, select our WAN interface and go into its settings, and once again we want to add IPv6 config, and we'll leave it as dynamic. Now it's possible that the failed addition last time has created an IP address, so we can either choose new, or we can just select the IP address that was created before and hasn't been assigned yet, so we can click on add for that. Now once that's added, we also need to go and do something on our LAN interface. So we'll go back to our LAN interface. It correctly has both IP addresses here already, but we need to enable IP forwarding on the LAN side so that clients behind that LAN subnet can forward their traffic through this interface. So we choose apply on that, and just we'll have to wait for that as well. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to go into our test virtual machine, and I noticed as I created it I forgot to uncheck the, we'll just go and stop it. It currently has an IP address, a public IP address, but that won't be used. So we're just going to stop our test VM, and once that's stopped, we can go into our settings for our LAN interface. I believe that I can deassociate that IP address from this. And the other thing we need to do is we need to add an IPv6 address. But as you can see, there's no add button or refresh button. I can't seem to figure out. But what I noticed was I just need to click on enable IP forwarding, and then we go IPv6 config, add an IPv6, dynamic, don't associate a public IP address. This is our testing machine behind the firewall, and then we can add that setting. Now, once that's added, just going to let that update, and unchecked IP forwarding, and I don't know why that stopped me from adding a secondary IP address unless I had IP forwarding enabled. I suppose it must think I'm going to be forwarding traffic in and out both through both interfaces, but I'm not. All right, so let's now go back to our virtual machines, and it looks like I actually had that running all that time, but, or is it refresh? Let me have a look. No, it didn't. All right, so the interface is telling us lies. So let's start both of these virtual machines up, and we'll have a look at what their IP addresses have picked up, because that'll be useful in the near future. So we'll go to the serial console and just watch the boot for a few seconds, and we should, when we see the boot complete, we should just see the interfaces have dual assignments, IPv6 and IPv4, once the boot's finished. And we can see IP addresses coming on to our interfaces there. And once it's completed, and we can see the login prompt, the console. And finally, it will say boot up complete, and you'll see the interface. we go. Alright, so now we can see our interfaces are all up and dual assigned with different IP addresses. Now let's have a look at our configuration. We'll log back in and we'll just have a look at our interface IP addresses, and we can see that we've got our WAN interface with a IP version 6 and our LAN interface as well. Right, so now we want to get our virtual machine, our test virtual machine, and we want to connect to it behind the firewall. So to do that, we need to tell everything behind the firewall that it's now being routed through the PFSense. So we'll go to our route tables or route tables, and I've already created one here at some point in the past. So I'm just going to delete that because it's might just delete that route table. It's not associated with anything. So let's do it from scratch so that we sort of understand. Alright, so again in route tables, and we want to create, and we want to make sure that it's in the right region. So select the region that you're creating your VMs in, and then we want to give it a name, and we just want to say PFSense and review and create, and create that. And then once we have a route table, we want to create the rules to, and we want to go back into root. Alright, so go into here, go to settings, and add some routes. Now we need two routes, an IPv4, so we're going to say IPv4, this is the default route for this subnet that we're going to attach it to. So we're going to say when you're heading to any IP4 address other than the local subnets, route through, and let's have a look at our, we don't want that one, we want it through this one. We want the LAN IP, route it through the LAN IP address on IP version 4. Then we want to do IPv6 default, and we want to say when you routing to, and this is the nomenclature for IPv6, when you route to any IPv6 address, route it through this IP version 6 address, and then choose add. So we now have our routes. Now this is where you got to get this right, otherwise things start doing routing loops and you don't get any traffic. The subnet that you want to associate your routing or routing table with is the LAN one. Don't put on the WAN one, you'll get no traffic. Everything comes to a stop. So choose the subnet that you're putting it on and go OK. Now from this moment forward, all the devices will be routing through the PFSense firewall. So let's go into our firewall and go into NAT, and we're going to create a port forwarding rule to forward traffic to our test virtual machine. And before we do that, let's go and find the IP address of the test virtual machine, and if we just refresh, it should say here, that's our private IP address there. So we want to route or port forward, I should say, from the WAN interface on IP version 4 TCP that hits the WAN address on, now we're going to move this to a high port, on that port we want to route it to this IP address back down to the SSH port, and NAT to test VM. Now once that's done, we can grab, let's grab this big long host name. Let's see if it's actually going to work. So we want to go SSH, the login user is that one, the port is 722, and we say yes. Now the fact that you get immediate access means that you have got it right. So your routing and everything's correct. If you don't, you need to investigate why it's not immediately connecting. So we've just logged into our test VM behind our PFSense firewall, and we're going to install a little web server so that we can just test that we've got external connectivity to that web server as well. Now, just from our test VM, when we ping an outside IP address on the internet, it works immediately. But if we go curl and we go 6, basically if we try for version 6, it doesn't work, but it does work for version 4. So we need to give ourselves outbound IP version 6 working. Now one way we can check to see if it's working is ping an IP version 6. Now it's resolving the address, so it's talking to DNS and getting an address, but it can't ping it. So let's have a look in the firewall and find out what's going on. So if we go into status, go system logs, and then we go firewall, and then we want to sort descending. So the latest is being shown here. So it's saying, let's have a look for ICMP version 6, just a little bit lower. So this is the IP address of our virtual machine, and this is the destination, and it's basically saying not allowed. So there's a deny, it's getting denied. So we want to go and first of all allow that traffic through on the LAN. So I'm going to make a change here. So now for some reason this doesn't work. So what we want to do, we're going to just make a slight change to this. Let's see if this is going to fix it. So we go and have a look at our IP addresses, and this is our FD, the one we're looking for. This is our IP addresses that we want to work, but it's in LAN subnets on IP version 6 doesn't seem to. So what we're going to do is choose address or alias. Now we want it to be the whole network. Now here we have an interesting thing. It just doesn't seem to give me the ability. Let's go back and have a look at that. LAN. This might not be right. So the next problem, IP version 6, but not giving us the ability. No, there we go. All right, so now we want to say take that IP address the number 5 off and just say, look, for this network, we want to allow it. Alright, let's see if that actually has helped. And so that still doesn't seem to be working. So it's saying everything from here, allow it. Let's have a look at our system logs again. Firewall and sort descending. And now it doesn't seem to have an error message from the ICMP anymore, so it's not blocking it. There's no default deny. So it looks like that firewall rule is doing what it should do. It's allowing the traffic. Now what's the problem? Well, let's go into NAT and have a look, and we find that the automatically generated NAT rules do not include a rule to NAT the IP version 6. So the first thing we want to do is say, look, we still want to keep the hybrid rules, but we want to add our own custom rules as well. So we change to hybrid outbound with rules you add, and then we want to come in here and we say IP version 6 any from network and port, and let's do 64 here. Destination is any. Okay, NAT IPv6 LAN subnet. And let's see if now this is working. Right, so now we have natting, outbound NAT working for IP version 6. So to test that, you could say, okay, can you please give me the external IP address of this network? And here we can see it there. So now, what more do we need? Well, let's have a look at rules to get the web server get access to the web server. So we want to create, we can just duplicate and just modify. So we want to say when anything hits port 80 HTTP and it's heading towards this, head it towards this test VM on HTTP, NAT to test VM HTTP, and save. And then we want, again, we want this same thing, but this time we want IP version 6. And we want to say when it hits the IP version 6 WAN address, we want to redirect it. And this is where we just go IP address here, and we want it redirected to this target IP address. Okay, so that looks, so IPv6 and apply. Now hoping when we've got IP version 6 and IP version 4, whoops, that's not right, is it? So when we connect to this one, we should now see an Nginx. Might try HTTP. Now specifying IP version 6, it looks like this. All right, so now we've got inbound traffic to our IP version 6 computer interface, and once again, if we grab our IP version 4, let's see if that works. Now that should now work it won't work on HTTPS. It's just being a pain, but let's just do it on that one, and it does work. So we're now connected inbound to our test server, and we've got connectivity outbound to from our test VM out to the internet. So some other things that you might want to do, you might want to install a Windows machine and then do some testing of whether the firewall is allowing all the web traffic. So do some extensive testing from a machine in the LAN subnet